You don't know what he means by that big. You just framed it for us. Dude, that big? Y'all, do you understand? If we could just go back 50 years, there are basically no black and brown people here in this room. You are not allowed to be in this room. You're not even allowed, you're not even going to be allowed in many places to get bank accounts, to do all sorts of things, be riding on the back of buses. You're going to be, one thing after another after another. You're not going to get loans. You could never get a loan to go to college.
But that's facts though, like I was saying,
I need 2 volunteers who think racism and inequality are big problems in the world, in the United States today. Let's just stick with the United States. And then I need 2 people who don't think that. You're going to make this argument. And they're going to coach you. You got to make this argument. And however you're going to do it, and the idea is racism and discrimination directed toward black and brown people is not really that big of a problem today in the United States. And you have to coach them. They have no idea what to say. Am I right? You would have no idea how to make the argument, but you're going to make the argument. And so the 2 of you at least have some idea because you've thought about it. And so give it a shot, and then they'll coach you a little bit.
I would really say that a lot of the I don't believe this, but I'm just going to say it.
No, hang on.
If
Be in the role.
If I did believe that.
No, don't say that.
Okay, I do believe
I
that.
am in the role. I am here. Start your sentence with, listen, racism, discrimination, it's not really that big of a problem in the U.S. because ...
Yeah, it's really not that big of a problem in the U.S. because a lot of the examples that people use to justify it, it's very one-off and very extreme examples. Specifically with police violence or everything. There's a lot of interactions that black people have with cops that aren't projected by the news, but then the 1 or 2 bad ones is what's re-said a million times.
I guess similar to that, it's not a huge issue. I think it's made a bigger issue through media and social media. The fact that we all have basically computers in our back pockets and can start recording anything at a given time and post it on the internet or edit things to make them look like something.
This is a very interesting discussion to me because basically they're arguing the premise that racism against black and brown people in America is not a big issue. My question would be, how do you define big issue within the country? And that's just the question that I will pose, and that kind of determines how you answer this question. But that's just something I have to ask. What makes something a big issue? That's for y'all too, if y'all can answer that.
They're not. So a lot of what you see is fake news, I guess.
I believe that racism is not an issue because we elected a black president, and we have black senators and governors. And a lot of the time, the difference between rich black people and poor black people isn't race, it's just education. So a lack of education in black communities is a bigger problem than any other discrimination.
All right, go ahead, Matt.
It's a lot of the discrimination that we see is institutionalized oppression, and even if it is real.
Wait, did you say it's institutionalized oppression? Dude, was that your word? Hold on. No, that's all right. You got look, if you think that, you got to throw those words out there to confuse people. Yeah, it's institutionalized oppression. So all the liberals are like, oh yeah, that guy gets it. He's got it. He's talking oppression. All right, go ahead.
And I lost my train of thought. And it, even if you are a victim of institutionalized oppression, playing the victim card or dwelling on it doesn't allow you to progress further. So we're holding ourselves back in that aspect, and it's more of a self problem than a.
So it's really an issue of people who have given up at some level their individual
I just think that the world is
motivation.
against them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, right. To overcome the odds that are against.
Another one that I believe is that it's definitely not a big issue in the U.S. compared to other countries, because in almost every country you can find some sort of persecuted group, and specifically in the U.S., the persecuted group, if you're talking about black people, has a lot of like power against like if you say someone's being racist towards you, like you can like have a way to like hit them back. But in a lot of other countries, like if you made that same complaint, like no one would care, because like you're the persecuted group. So in that way, again, it's not that big of an issue in the U.S. because at least there's a way to like
I said previously, because I'm not in this discussion. It's like a hypothetical thing. The black people are saying that racism is not a big deal. Then you have the white students who are saying it is a big deal. My thing is this: how do you define a big deal? Is big deal in reference to it's completely going to stop you from achieving the life you want? Then in that case, it's not a big deal. Because of course, if you're black, you can still get the life you want in America. You definitely can. Like, and trying to argue that you can't, it's just not true. But if you're like, how do you define big deal? And I'm waiting for the professor to say that, or like what is the big deal? Like what's the specifics of this debate? Hey y'all, make sure y'all subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to subscribe.
attack the racists if they exist.
People who are in minoritized communities, right? They actually, ironically, have been empowered a great degree in the United States by being able to identify and isolate and say something about the things that happen to them, and then it can be a real problem. Like end up on the front page of CNN. That Sam Richards and maybe not CNN, but the Collegian, that Sam Richards discriminated against someone in class because whatever, he's a racist. Like, oh my God, that's like a headline on it. Maybe the Collegian, but nobody else would care. All right, yeah, go ahead.
A lot of the problems that we see are less about race and more about your economic class or like your financial standing. And it's a lot about your mindset to get to a certain place rather than what you look like. So like the races are spread out amongst every class, so you just have to strive to put yourself in a better financial standpoint.
All right, so in other words, one of the problems that we see in the U.S. When we start talking about racism.
My thing is this, man. Racism will always exist. The reason racism will always exist is because racist people exist. And because racist people exist, they're going to keep racism alive. That's just what it is. There are racist white people. There are racist black people. Race isn't... I'm not trying to do a tongue twister, but race isn't race specific. You don't have to be this race to be racist. The reason I brought this up is because no matter what you look at, someone will always be able to bring up an isolated situation of racism. Where things get a little weird is when you start talking about an entire community of people being oppressed. That's where things get weird, because let's say that you aren't a member of this oppressed community that people say are oppressed. Like, let's say you aren't black or you aren't a minority group, but you're living a life where you're not able to get the life that you want because you are facing issues. Like you grew up in a bad neighborhood. You grew up in a state that doesn't have access to electricity in the same places. You grew up in a state where you have to grow up and farm. You have to walk a mile to school. You have to, but you just aren't a minority. That's, in my opinion, where things get a little funny. Because whether you want to admit it or not, there are people who aren't black, who aren't a minority in this country, who are white, who grow up in impoverished areas, who grow up in where they do face discrimination, where they can't live, where they can't easily, or they can't naturally get the life they want. Same way there are black people who grow up in areas where they can't naturally get the life they want. That's where things get a little funny. Because struggle, in my eyes, is not race specific. So when you talk about like a certain race being like held down furthermore, I mean, it all just depends how you look at it. I'm not gonna hold you.
Discrimination all of the things that go along with that. As often as not, what we're talking about is class. Things, the problems that people experience, what they face are actually class-based, not race-based. So things happen to people, they have some encounter with the police, let's say, or like this woman that we used the last class, who I gave the example of, who had to give birth in a jail cell. It wasn't that she was Latina and Hispanic. The issue was that she was poor. Had she been rich and Hispanic, or rich and Native American, or rich and black, or whatever, she probably would not have given birth in a jail cell. That's what you're saying. All right, that's a good point. Fair point. All right, bro.
The last one we talked about was like with employers and everything, like in the sense that if you have a black candidate and a white candidate, and they're both like educated, no criminal history, like no other, like they can converse well, like there's no other issues, that like they will almost certainly take the black candidate because like they're incentivized to have more like diversity. And like in the same way with like colleges, like if you have like
I hate when I hear discussions like that, or he kind of flipped it, because that's the reason I don't like it. It's because that same statement, you could just flip it to support the other side. Or they'll always take the white candidate because of racism, or they'll always take the black candidate because of they're incentivized to. Bruh, first of all, if you have two super highly qualified candidates, whether you're black, man, woman, white, you're going to get a job. Let's not forget, if you're super qualified and you are just extremely intelligent, you are just really that person, you really think it's going to be that hard to find a vocation? It's not. So when I hear this type of like, oh, somebody got chosen over me, and if you're really that person, you're going to get like 10 offers anyways. You won't even know why someone else chose over you. If we're being completely honest, when you're not chosen for a position, thousands of people usually apply, so you're not even going to know who's chosen. You're not even going to know who considered you. If we're being completely honest, these type of debates aren't even that realistic.
a white person and a black person with like exactly the same qualifications, like in many ways, like there's incentives to pick the black person, which in a way like offsets any like possible institutionalized racism.
So in other words, hey, by the way, let me just say that these aren't Sean's ideas. You're feeding him ideas that you know, right? And bro, same with you. What's your name again? Isaac. Same with Isaac. These aren't his ideas. I had to pick two people who I knew would be able to feed ideas. Okay, so one of the issues is that we have these inequalities in the world, right? And we have discrimination, but we also have programs and things that are set up, other systems that are set up, so that when people experience something, right, or that other programs that uplift enough people, right, and give enough people opportunities, that in fact what happens is it offsets the negative experiences of discrimination and so on. Yeah, that's all right. That's cool, man. All right, go ahead.
Racism is something that people unify behind, and people unify behind, and it's not always about race. Sometimes people use racism just to push against people who have different ideas than them.
Dude, awesome. Yep, exactly. So sometimes what comes out, in other words, all right, so sometimes when people start talking about race and racism and discrimination, it seems like they're talking about race, but in fact what they're really talking about is power. And so you're talking about issues that it just sort of, it ends up, or for example, if black or brown people start talking about inequality, we immediately assume they're talking about race. But oftentimes what they're doing is talking about inequality, which is not about race, but inequality which might be about gender, or it might be about class, or it might be about culture, or it might be about any number of other things, religion, but we immediately just start thinking that it's about race and racism. So in other words, to follow up on that, so what you're saying, in other words, is that a lot of times we keep seeing headlines about racism and discrimination and so on, but that's not what the issue is, really. It just comes out that way. So how about just kick one out about what the Nigerian, the kinds of things the Nigerian community says about the Black American community?
Like one of like the like craziest statistics is like one of like especially immigrants, like immigrants from Nigeria, or one of like the most highly educated people in like America, like with like graduate programs and like bachelor programs, like they actually hold the most like advanced degrees. And that kind of goes against the point of like, if there was racism, because like we're the same color, but like we don't often experience the same challenges.
I think at least what I think, if you're a normal, sane human, you know that racism exists. And I'm not saying, oh no, you know it exists. Racism is real. Point blank, period. When people use that type of argument to, I guess, justify the point that race doesn't hold you back, they're not saying that racism doesn't exist. What I think they're saying is racism is not strong enough to hold you back from achieving the life you want. And here's an example. And the reason that argument, hypothetically speaking, would be so strong is because it kind of ties into the issue that it's not necessarily race that holds you back. Because you look at Nigerian Americans or Nigerians who come here who have the most advanced degrees, period. I don't know if that's true. I'm not going to say period. But who have a lot of advanced degrees, it literally proves that race or the way you look specifically doesn't hold you back. It kind of points things to a different category, such as your culture. You could talk about the African American culture specifically, but it just points the issues in a different way, in a different direction, which I think we all know. At least what I think is that the issue itself isn't race exactly. It's like a mixture of things. It's like a mixture of different things. So that actually is a pretty strong argument in my opinion.
So obviously race can't be the only thing if we look the same.
Okay, so in other words, so here, let me kick it out. Let me just expand on that a little bit. That's good. So in the United States, the most highly educated group of immigrants. So immigrants come to the U.S. from all over the world, right? Lots of different places. All continents. Every year. In spite of what Donald Trump would like in some places, they're just coming from everywhere, okay? Legally, illegally. Well, he's just trying to stop people coming without documents. So in fairness. So people are coming from all over the world. The people who are coming and who are most educated, who are most likely to have not only college degree but advanced degrees, are coming from Africa. And within Africa, Nigeria is one of the highest. The actual highest is Egypt, by the way. Egyptians are the high. I think it's 65% or 67% of Egyptian adults in the United States have college degrees. But coming from Africa. So it's like, wait, most people, until you say you were Nigerian, most people in the class assume you were African American probably. Except Nigerians, because they know who you are, right? Dude, and so like, wait, hang on. But that's not happening in his community. Why is his community doing so well? Like, what's going on? What's happening in his community? What's happening for him that, he's liable to do, he's probably going to do quite well here at Penn State and move on and have advanced degrees and make a lot of money. So what's with that? Where's the discrimination if that's happening? You got to go a little deeper in the argumentation.
So, relatively, we are a young, nation, and it's only been a few decades since, Jim Crow laws have been sort of extinguished. So, if you think about it in that sense, we're getting there compared to other, older countries.
Exactly.
Compared to who? And my thing is, when people say that about America, I always get extremely confused because who are you comparing our country to that you think is better for our people? Who, what country on earth is better for black people than America? And I'm not trying to bash any of them. That's not what I do. But that's a real question. Who are you comparing to? China? Realistically, what country is better for black people? All around better for black people than America? It doesn't exist. I sound like a Boy Scout right now, but maybe I am a Boy Scout. It doesn't exist. I'm sorry. It's not real. It's not real, bro. It's not real. America is the best country for our people, point blank, period. And every time people try to, and I notice it a lot of young people, younger people, when they try to like justify the prejudice against African Americans, they always point back to like Jim Crow era or slavery, or they use like crazy analogies. Because I just did a video where a lady used a Monopoly analogy, 400 years of we had no turns on Monopoly or something crazy. But it's never any like modern examples. And I'm not trying to say, oh, you can't find any modern examples. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that what I've noticed as a trend is that we never use modern examples. Why?
So what do you need to know? So here's the question. Exactly. Even compared to here. Look, it's not that big of a problem today. So here's the deal. You ready? Think about what the statement is. Think about how you interpreted it. Think about what it is. Not that big of a problem today. What do you mean by that big? What do you think I mean by that? That's the first thing you should say in your minds is
that actually is the first thing I said in my mind, which is crazy. Like, what does that mean? Like, not big of a problem. Like, it depends how you look at it.
Wait, what do you mean that big? Because that big, how you define that big is huge. And so Sean, for example, Sean and I were talking the other day, we had a long conversation, and we were talking about all the people in his organization, Turning Point, and they have views from all over the world, and there are different perspectives, and they're arguing about all this, and his views are just, at some point you're going to talk. Right now you're just on mute, because I just need other people to talk. But like, dude, this guy is like, so immensely complex in his views of the world, just like me, right? Like mental illness status. Like thinking thoughts from everywhere, like drawing from everything. Okay, maybe you're going to get there, bro. Right now you're all right. But you start with that big. And so if he takes the mic and says, yeah, well, I don't really think racism and discrimination against black and brown people is that big of a problem. Many of you would be, oh, boo, whatever, right? But the question, why would you say, you don't know what he means by that big. You just framed it for us. Dude, that big? Y'all, do you understand that if we could just go back 50 years, there are basically no black and brown people here in this room. You are not allowed to be in this room. You're not even going to be allowed in many places to get bank accounts, to do all sorts of things, be riding on the back of buses. You're going to be, one thing after another. You're not going to get loans. You could never get a loan to go to college. So it's like, with that big of a problem, it's like, well, in the context of so many other things, yeah, it's not really that big of a problem. But how many of us did that? How many of you went right there immediately and thought, well, what do you mean by that big? Because that's the key right here.
But that's facts, though. Like I was saying, and I don't think I'm a genius or nothing, but that's what I'm saying. Like, in the context of the question, how do you define that big? Even looking at our ancestors, our struggles today is not even in the same realm of reality. Like he was saying, wouldn't even be allowed in the same rooms. Or let's not even go back in time. Let's go to a different country today, where you have these children caught up in caste systems where they're working 18 hours a day mining lithium or something crazy, where they are like, if you look at our problems and then you translate it to a different time or a different place on earth, they're like, they're not even in the same realm of debate. That's all I'm trying to say. And the professor actually did a really good job of doing that, or putting things into different perspective. A problem that I've noticed is that we don't put things into perspective. When you're in a certain realm of privilege, it's like you can only see your problems. You're very tunnel vision. You can only see what you're facing. But at the end of the day, there are different people who, for sure, are facing worse problems than you. But anyways, if you have any suggestions for me, comment down below. It's Jojo.